The warship drifted at the edge of the nebula like a held breath, its hull scarred from old battles and newer losses, and inside it a human soldier stood alone near the observation glass, watching alien stars bleed color into the dark, knowing he did not belong here and yet feeling that fate had already written his name into this place. He had been born on a quiet colony world where rain fell gently and nothing asked for bravery. But war had taken him anyway, reshaped him into something harder, something quieter, and now he wore that silence like armor as he served among beings who barely believed humans deserved to stand beside them. They called him by his rank, never his name, a human soldier assigned to auxiliary duty, tolerated rather than trusted, useful when things broke or when someone needed to walk into danger first. And he did so without complaint because complaining never saved anyone. She appeared the first time in the garden ring, not announced, not escorted, just there among living light and drifting petals. An alien princess in exile from her own court, bound by laws older than his species. Laws that weighed on her shoulders even when she smiled. Her skin carried a soft glow, like moonlight through water, eyes deep and amused and tired all at once. And when she spoke it was with a warmth that startled him, as if she had chosen kindness in a universe that punished it. "You look like someone who understands impossible tasks," she said once, half laughing, her voice musical but edged with sadness. And he shrugged because understanding impossible tasks was what had kept him alive. She told him stories without asking for permission, about her people, about vows sealed by ancient rites, about destiny being something her kind could sense but never escape, and he listened because listening was safer than hoping. Then one quiet cycle she joked, light as a drifting seed, saying that if a human ever found the rarest flower in known space, the one that bloomed only in death zones and vanished when touched by fear, she would belong to him by her own law. She smiled when she said it, expecting laughter, expecting dismissal, expecting the human to treat it as fantasy, because no one survived the places where that flower grew, and certainly no one came back with proof. But the human did not laugh. Something in his chest tightened. Not desire, not ambition, but recognition. Because soldiers understood challenges spoken lightly. Because jokes often hid truths too heavy to say aloud. "Where does it grow?" he asked quietly, eyes steady, voice calm, and for the first time her smile faltered. She told him anyway, because part of her wanted to believe, because part of her wanted the universe to be kinder than law allowed, describing a shattered moon locked inside a gravity wound, a place torn by constant battle remnants, drifting mines, ancient wrecks, and storms that stripped hope as easily as flesh. Galactic law forbade entry, she said softly. Rescue missions failed there, warships avoided it, even her own people spoke its name with mourning. And she added one last thing, almost a whisper, no one who went there returned unchanged. That night the human sat alone, replaying every battle he had survived, every order that had cost lives, every promise he had failed to keep. And he thought about the way her eyes had searched his face, hoping not to hope. By dawn cycle he had filed his departure request. It was denied. He went anyway because human soldiers had a long history of treating law as something to wrestle with rather than obey blindly, and he stole nothing except time, slipping into a scout craft older than him, patched together from a dozen wars. The journey tore at him, alarms screaming, gravity twisting, memories surfacing like wounds reopened. And through it all he held onto the image of a flower blooming where nothing else dared. On the shattered moon, battle ghosts still lingered, wreckage drifting like bones, and the silence pressed down heavier than fire. But he moved forward, step by careful step, heart hammering, breath measured, refusing to give fear anything to feed on. He found the flower at the edge of a crater filled with starlight, its petals dark and luminous at once, impossibly fragile, impossibly strong. And when he reached for it, he remembered her smile, remembered the joke that was never meant to come true. He did not touch it with bare hands. He shielded it, protected it, treated it like something sacred rather than something to be claimed, and the flower allowed itself to be taken. When the scout craft limped back toward the warship, alarms flashing and systems failing, the human collapsed against the controls, bloodied but breathing, clutching proof that destiny could be challenged. The warship detected him moments before he lost consciousness. Rescue crews rushing, disbelief spreading faster than any alert, and somewhere deep inside the vessel, the alien princess felt a pull in her chest that no law could explain, because jokes were not supposed to change fate, and humans were not supposed to survive legends. Yet both had just collided, and the universe would never be the same again. The warship moved again, but nothing felt the same. Corridors that once hummed with routine now carried whispers and careful glances, because a human soldier had returned from a place that erased names, and belief had cracked across the hull like stress fractures. He woke slowly, pain arriving in waves before memory did. Every breath burning, every muscle reminding him of gravity storms and silence. And when his eyes opened, the first thing he saw was alien light bending softly around the medical chamber. She was there, standing farther back than she needed to, hands folded as if afraid to touch the moment. The alien princess watching him with eyes no longer playful, no longer distant, but searching, almost frightened by what he had done. "You should not be alive," she said quietly, not as accusation but as wonder, and he almost smiled because soldiers heard that often. "Alive is relative," he answered, voice rough, and her lips curved briefly before falling again, because humor could not cover what weighed between them now. The flower rested in a containment field nearby, petals dimmer than before, as if exhausted by the journey, and she felt it before she looked at it. A pressure in her chest, a pull that resonated through her bones, awakening something ancient and restrained. She told him then what she had not told him before, that the flower was not just rare but bound to old alien covenants, that it bloomed only when destiny bent around sacrifice, that it marked those who challenged the path set for them. Her people believed humans could not trigger such signs, she admitted, because humans lacked the resonance, lacked the stillness, lacked the obedience to cosmic design, and yet here he was, breathing, proof trembling between them. The Warship Council convened within hours. Alien elders projected in cold light, voices sharp with fear dressed as authority, and the human soldier was ordered confined, questioned, evaluated like an anomaly rather than a person. They spoke of law, of contamination, of precedent, of danger, because if one human could return with the flower, then the rules that governed 1,000 species no longer held, and order depended on those rules remaining unquestioned. The princess stood silent through it all, claws digging into her palms beneath her robes, because by her own law the joke had become binding, and binding laws among her people were not suggestions. That night she came to him alone, slipping past guards who pretended not to see. Her presence soft but heavy, filling the small chamber with unspoken gravity. "I never thought you would go," she said, voice low, stripped of ceremony. "I thought the universe would protect me from hope." He shifted carefully, meeting her gaze. "I did not go because of the law," he said. "I went because you spoke like someone already caged." Her breath caught, a sound too small to hide, because alien royalty were raised to accept destiny without resistance, to smile while being carried toward futures chosen long before birth. She confessed then that her fate was sealed, that she was promised to a political union that would end a quiet war, that love was irrelevant, that choice was considered dangerous among her kind. "The flower does not change that," she said, almost pleading. "It only awakens ancient clauses, trials, battles of proof, things that destroy those who fail." He looked at her, really looked, at the strength she carried alone, at the fear she was never allowed to show, and something inside him hardened with resolve rather than anger. "Then let it awaken," he said, "because some things are worth standing in front of storms for." She felt it then, unmistakably, the pull of destiny tightening, the flower responding to his words, petals glowing faintly as if listening, and her people's myths stirred like sleeping beasts. Alarms echoed through the ship, not mechanical but ceremonial, ancient signals embedded deep within alien systems, responding to the artifact's activation, broadcasting a challenge across known space. "A human has invoked the right." An elder voice thundered through the halls, disbelief cracking into rage. "By law he must be tested. By fate he must be opposed." Warships altered course, not to rescue, not to protect, but to converge, because challenges drew predators as surely as blood in water. And the galaxy watched, stunned and unsettled. The princess reached for his hand without thinking, skin warm, trembling, and when their fingers met, something aligned, something irreversible. "I am afraid," she admitted, "not of losing, but of wanting something I was never meant to have." He squeezed her hand gently, eyes steady despite the pain still tearing through him. "I have been afraid my whole life," he said, "and I am still here." Outside the viewport, Stars shifted as the warship entered contested space. Destiny unfolding not as prophecy but as consequence, and somewhere deep within alien memory, a truth resurfaced that terrified empires, that humans did not bend fate quietly. They challenged it until it either broke or became something new. The first alien warship arrived without warning, tearing space open ahead of them like a wound that refused to close, its silhouette vast and ancient, etched with symbols older than the princess herself. And the moment its shadow crossed the human vessel, every system trembled as if recognizing a superior authority. Silence followed, heavy and deliberate, because this was not a battle entrance but a judgment. The human felt it even from the infirmary, a pressure behind his eyes, a gravity that did not belong to physics but to expectation. And he knew then that the galaxy had decided to look directly at him. The council's voice echoed again through the ship, no longer distant projections but live authority, declaring that the right had progressed beyond rumor, beyond accident, and that the challenger would now face revelation. The princess stood beside him, her composure cracking at the edges, because revelation was the most dangerous phase of the rite, the part erased from public history, the part spoken of only in fragments and warnings. She tried to speak, but the ship itself answered first. Ancient systems awakening. Lights shifting from utilitarian blue to deep ceremonial gold. Corridors reconfiguring. Doors sealing and opening with intent rather than command. What is happening? The human asked softly, though he already felt the answer settling into his bones. She swallowed, eyes fixed on the changing walls. The rite is not only a test of courage, she said. It is a test of origin. The chamber ahead opened, drawing them forward without force. And when they crossed its threshold, the truth struck him harder than any battlefield impact. At the center floated the flower, no longer dim, no longer contained. Its petals unfurled fully now, radiant and terrifying, and around it ancient glyphs burned into the air, reacting not to the princess, but to him. The elders gasped as one, shock rippling through their controlled presence, because the symbols ignited in patterns that should not exist, patterns reserved for a lineage long declared extinct. Impossible, one elder whispered. The human line cannot carry the mark. The princess turned to him slowly, fear and awe colliding in her gaze, because she knew those symbols, knew the myths they belonged to, stories of a precursor species that defied the universe itself. Humans were not newcomers. The elder continued, voice trembling now. They were exiles, stripped of memory, scattered, weakened by design, because their ancestors had once challenged fate so violently that reality bent to stop them. The human staggered, breath shallow, fragments surfacing like ghosts, dreams of stars he had never seen, instincts too old for his short life. The reason humans adapted too fast, survived too much, refused to submit quietly. The flower did not choose him. The princess realized aloud. It recognized him. The chamber shook as enemy warships emerged in waves. Not to observe now, but to intervene. Because if the truth spread unchecked, the balance of power would collapse overnight. Fire blossomed outside the hull, the warship shuddering as shields strained, and alarms screamed not of failure but of inevitability. The council shouted orders, containment protocols, termination clauses, because law could survive many things but not the return of its greatest mistake. The princess stepped in front of him without thinking, arms spread slightly, defiant in a way she had never been allowed to be, and her voice rang through the chamber. By right and by law older than your fear, he is protected. They hesitated because the right demanded witnesses, demanded sequence, demanded obedience even from those who wrote the rules. The human reached out then, not to the flower, but to her, grounding himself in the present, in her warmth, in the simple truth that he was still himself despite the revelations crashing down. If I am what they fear, he said quietly, then maybe that is why I was sent here. Her eyes shone, not with tears but with fire, because destiny had just shifted from burden to weapon. The flower pulsed once, violently, releasing a surge that tore through the chamber and out into space. A signal impossible to suppress, broadcasting the truth across every listening mind. Humanity was not weak, not accidental, not insignificant. Humanity had been restrained. Enemy warships faltered, systems glitching as ancient safeguards recognized the mark and froze, refusing to strike what they were once designed to obey. The elders fell silent, terror naked now, because the big twist they could never undo had arrived. The human soldier was not defying destiny. He was its return. Space burned, not with fire alone but with consequence, as the signal released by the flower rippled outward faster than any warship could chase it, slipping through gates, relays, and ancient thought channels buried inside empires that had not felt fear in millennia. Across the galaxy councils froze mid-command, fleets hesitated, and long-dormant protocols awakened. Because the broadcast carried more than sound or light, it carried recognition. The human soldier felt it like a pressure wave inside his skull, memories that were not memories brushing against his thoughts, instincts older than language urging him to stand, to endure, to finish what had begun long before his birth. Outside, the warship shields flared and cracked as hostile fleets recovered from their moment of paralysis. Commanders screaming overrides, weapons cycling up despite systems protesting in ancient code, and space itself seemed to strain under the weight of opposing wills. "They are going to fire," the princess whispered, terror no longer hidden, because no right protected against annihilation on this scale. The human moved without thinking, pain forgotten, stepping toward the command nexus as if drawn by an invisible thread. And to the shock of the crew, the alien systems parted for him, interfaces blooming alive under his touch. Every species felt it then, the larger truth surfacing, that the precursor safeguards embedded in galactic infrastructure were keyed not to blood but to resolve, not to form but to defiance. Human warships began to respond, scattered across distant fronts, outdated vessels suddenly finding alien doors open, ancient armaments unlocking, forgotten subroutines offering control rather than resistance. On Earth and its colonies, alarms rang without explanation. Commanders staring in disbelief as their fleets received access to corridors and weapons humanity had never built, never known existed. The galaxy reacted violently, empires declaring emergency unity, long-standing rivals aligning out of shared terror, because a restrained species awakening was more dangerous than any external threat. The alien princess watched tactical projections bloom across the chamber, thousands of ships converging, billions of lives shifting course, and she understood the cost of what he represented. "This will not end with us," she said softly, voice breaking. "They will hunt your kind, rewrite history, burn worlds if they must." He met her gaze, steady despite the storm. "Then we stand where it begins." The first volley struck, energy lances tearing into space around them. The warship shuddering violently as secondary hulls failed. Crew thrown against walls, alarms cascading into one continuous scream. In response, the ship did something unprecedented. It did not retreat. It advanced, folding space forward with human input guiding alien engines, plunging straight into the heart of the hostile formation. Shockwaves rippled as precursor shields flared, bending attacks aside. Not invincible but stubborn, designed not to dominate but to endure long enough for choice to matter. The flower dimmed rapidly, draining itself to sustain the awakening systems, petals curling inward as if burning from the inside. And the princess cried out because she felt its life tied to hers now. "If it fades, the right collapses," she said urgently, "and so does the protection." The human looked at the tactical storm, at the impossible odds, and then at her, understanding dawning with terrible clarity. "Then it cannot be an artifact anymore," he said. "It has to be a promise." He reached for the flower, not shielding himself this time, but offering, and the pain that followed was unlike anything he had known, ripping through nerves and memory alike, binding ancient resonance to living flesh. The galaxy reeled as the signal changed, no longer an object broadcasting recognition, but a living being declaring presence. "Humanity is here." The words echoed everywhere, not spoken but felt, settling into minds regardless of language. Enemy fleets faltered again, not frozen now but shaken, crews questioning orders, commanders realizing they were about to ignite wars that could never truly end. Some fired anyway, fear louder than reason, and stars died in flashes as entire squadrons vanished, collateral damage spiraling outward, trade routes collapsing, neutral worlds dragged unwillingly into the widening conflict. The princess collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed by the lives touching her awareness, the cost of destiny pressing down like gravity, and the human caught her before she fell, holding her as space itself screamed, This is the consequence. She whispered, "Destiny choosing you does not spare the universe." He held her tighter, eyes fixed on the storm beyond the viewport. "I know," he said, "and we carry it anyway." Far away, ancient watchers stirred, entities that had slept since the first human defiance, sensing the return not of conquerors, but of challengers. The age of controlled fate was ending, and the galaxy had just entered an era where humans were no longer contained, only confronted. The warship burned its way through the collapsing front lines, not triumphant but relentless, hull scorched, systems bleeding power, carried forward by something deeper than strategy. Because retreat would turn the galaxy's fear into certainty, and certainty would harden into extermination. Inside the command nexus, the human stood braced against a console that felt almost alive beneath his hands. Veins of light tracing up his arms, not consuming him but sinking, as if ancient systems were finally listening instead of resisting. Every breath felt borrowed, every heartbeat loud. Yet his mind was clear in a way it had never been before, because clarity came when there was no path backward. The princess stayed close, refusing evacuation, her presence anchoring him to something human within himself. Even as billions of alien minds brushed the edges of her awareness through the right's living network. "They are watching us," she whispered, voices trembling through her words. Entire civilizations holding their breath, some in fear, some in hope. He nodded slowly, feeling it too, the galaxy leaning in, waiting to see whether humans would become what legend feared, or something far more dangerous. Enemy formations closed again, tighter now, smarter, adapting as predators did, cutting off corridors, sacrificing ships to funnel the warship into a kill zone where even precursor shields would fail. The human saw it instantly, patterns clicking into place not because he was special, but because humanity had always learned fastest under pressure. "If we go forward we die," he said calmly, "and if we run we condemn everyone who shares our name." The princess met his gaze, eyes shining with tears she no longer tried to hide. "Then we stand," she said, "not as royalty, not as symbol, but as choice." He reached out and took her hand again, grounding human warmth against alien light. And for a brief moment the noise of the battle faded, replaced by something quieter and stronger. He opened the channel, not to fleets, not to councils, but to the countless minds brushing against the right, letting them feel his exhaustion, his fear, his stubborn resolve. "We are not here to rule you," he said, voice carrying without volume. "We are here because we were never meant to disappear quietly." Across space, human ships answered, battered cruisers, patched frigates, colony defense craft held together by will and rust, emerging from shadows and jump points they should not have been able to access. They came not as conquerors but as witnesses, taking positions around the central warship, forming a living wall of defiance. Alien commanders watched in disbelief as human fleets synchronized instantly, not through command hierarchy but through shared instinct, adapting, covering weaknesses, absorbing losses without breaking formation. "This is what they were afraid of," one elder whispered, "unity without permission." The enemy launched everything. Desperate now, entire arsenals igniting space, turning the battlefield into a storm of light and debris. Human ships fell, alarms cutting short as hulls ruptured, lives ending in flashes too brief for ceremony. And the human felt each loss like a weight on his chest. Not guilt, but responsibility. The princess cried out as the right flared violently, overwhelmed by grief and resolve intertwining across species, and she collapsed against him, shaking. "I cannot hold them all," she sobbed. "There is too much pain." He held her, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then don't hold it alone," he said, and he opened himself fully to the network, not as artifact or symbol, but as a man who had lost friends, worlds, futures. The shift was immediate and staggering. The right changed again, no longer centered on her or the flower or ancient law, but distributed human resilience flowing outward, stabilizing, grounding, teaching the network how to endure instead of fracture. Alien ships hesitated mid-attack, crews faltering as unfamiliar emotions surged through them. Grief without hatred, courage without command. This was the true legacy of humanity's ancestors, not domination, but the ability to stand inside chaos without surrendering empathy. The central enemy flagship powered a final weapon, a reality shear designed to erase everything in its path, human and alien alike, because fear had burned away all restraint. The princess looked up, eyes clear now despite the tears. If that fires, there is no destiny left to argue with. The human straightened, pain flaring white-hot. Then this is where it ends, he said, either with extinction or with choice proven stronger than fear. He stepped forward into the heart of the nexus, letting the systems draw fully from him, letting ancient safeguards and human stubbornness merge. Across the battlefield, time seemed to slow. Weapons charging, ships burning, lives hanging in fragile balance. And the galaxy waited, not for prophecy, but for what a single human would choose to give when there was nothing left to save himself. The moment stretched beyond measurement, not frozen but held, as if the universe itself leaned closer to see whether courage would falter at the very edge of annihilation. The reality shear on the enemy flagship reached critical mass, space around it screaming in distortion, stars bending like reflections on shattered glass, and every living mind connected to the right felt the approaching end. The human felt it too, not as fear but as certainty. The quiet, understanding soldiers carried into last stands, and he breathed in slowly, anchoring himself in memory. Rain on his childhood world, laughter he barely remembered. The first time someone had looked at him and seen more than a tool. The princess stood with him, no longer behind, no longer protected. Her hand firm in his, eyes steady despite the tears tracing light down her face. If you do this, she said softly, you may not come back. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile born not from hope but from peace. Then it will still be worth it. He opened himself completely, not resisting the pull of ancient systems, not guarding what remained of his strength, and the precursor network responded instantly, not consuming him but amplifying what he already was. Across the battlefield, every human ship felt it. Engines stabilizing, shields hardening just enough, crews finding clarity in the chaos, and alien vessels felt something new and terrifying. Restraint. The human spoke one final time through the right, not as challenger, not as symbol, but as a voice stripped bare. We are done being erased, he said. But we are not here to erase you. The words carried weight no weapon could match, settling into minds, slowing fingers on triggers, fracturing certainty built on fear. The enemy flagship fired anyway, because some could not imagine a universe that did not kneel. The human stepped forward into the surge, light and pain and memory colliding, and for an instant the galaxy thought it had lost him. Then the impossible happened. The reality shear bent, not shattered, redirected by layered defiance, human resilience woven through precursor design, and the blast collapsed inward, consuming the flagship that birthed it, space sealing behind it like a scar closing. Silence fell, absolute and disbelieving. Ships drifted, weapons powered down mid-cycle, alarms fading into stunned quiet, and slowly the galaxy realized it was still there, intact, changed. The human collapsed, systems releasing him gently, as if in gratitude. His body suddenly too fragile to hold what it had carried. The princess caught him, sinking to the floor, holding him as light dimmed around them, sobbing openly now, not as royalty, not as destiny's vessel, but as someone who had almost lost the one choice she had ever made for herself. Stay, she whispered. Please stay. He breathed shallowly, eyes fluttering, and with effort he focused on her face. The glow, the strength, the freedom now trembling within reach. Looks like, he murmured, I broke a few laws. She laughed through tears, a sound raw and beautiful. You shattered them. Rescue teams flooded the chamber, human and alien together. No hesitation now, no hierarchy enforced, only urgency and shared purpose. Hours later the warship drifted among allied fleets, wounds visible but pride unbroken, and across the galaxy transmissions erupted, not of victory but of reckoning. Ancient treaties dissolved overnight, councils disbanded, new dialogues forced into existence, because the truth could no longer be contained. Humanity had returned to the stars not as conquerors, but as equals who refused to be diminished. The human awoke days later to soft light and quiet. The princess seated beside him. No guards, no ceremony, just presence. The rite is complete, she told him gently. The flower is gone. The artifact laws ended with it. But something new has taken its place. He frowned weakly, something worse. She smiled, touching his hand. Something harder, choice. By her people's law, she was free now, no longer bound to futures chosen in fear. And by galactic reckoning, humanity was no longer restrained, only accountable. The galaxy would not be peaceful, not yet, but it would be honest, and that honesty would hurt. He squeezed her fingers, tired but alive. Guess we both changed destiny. She leaned down, forehead resting against his. Destiny did not stand a chance. Outside, the viewport stars burned steady and bright, no longer distant witnesses but reachable paths. And somewhere among them humanity's future unfolded, not written by prophecy, but earned by standing firm when the universe expected them to disappear.